At a time when impassioned protesters are demanding an overhaul of police departments and the justice system, there's renewed demand for systemic economic change to uplift millions of Americans in communities that have been left behind. The president is heralding opportunity zones as the greatest new tool to save distressed neighborhoods.
These deserving communities have not known opportunity in a long time, but now the investments are flooding in, creating energy and creating excitement like they haven't seen for a long time.
But how much do you know about these O-zones, and who stands to gain in what could be a $6 trillion investment program? Does Kansas City? KCPT follows the money. Next.
The O-Zones on KCPT is made possible in part by the Kauffman Foundation, with additional support from Robert and Marlise Gorley.
Welcome everyone, I'm Nick Haynes, and you have entered the O-Zone. And if you've never heard the phrase opportunity zones before, you will. There's a lot of money at stake. The question is, who stands to benefit, and will Kansas City? If you're scratching your head, confused or befuddled, well, we have your back. We've taken all the hard work out of it for you. Fasten your seatbelt. This is Opportunity Zones 101. Opportunity zones were tucked into the tax cuts signed by President Trump back in 2017. The goal? To encourage private investment in low-income communities and create jobs. So where are they? Well, you may not realize there are more than 8,000 opportunity zones around the country. 74 of them are in Kansas, 161 are in Missouri. So how were they chosen? Well, that decision was made by your state governor from census data on places most in need of help. So what's in it for investors? They can avoid paying taxes for one thing and do a bit of community good at the same time. In fact, if investors leave their money in opportunity zones for 10 years, they pay zero capital gains tax. So what might these investments look like? Well, it could be housing, shops, manufacturing facilities, but there are some restrictions. That means no so-called sin businesses like casinos or liquor stores. Investors looking to take advantage of these zones don't have to live or have a business in one of these zones. You can invest from anywhere, which has raised concerns that outside investors will be insensitive to the needs of these communities and risk displacing residents. Several community organizations are now trying to address that here. They're connecting would-be investors with local entrepreneurs and community leaders to make sure they benefit the neighborhoods they're intended to serve. But there are very few rules when it comes to these opportunity zones, and investors are not required to work with community partners. If you want to know where these opportunity zones are in your area, you may be surprised. Yes, areas east of Troost are included, but so are developing areas like Martin City. There are even 3 in suburban Johnson County, including downtown Shawnee. Checking in with us now for a status report on how opportunity zones are working in Kansas City is Emmett Pearson, who leads Kansas City's largest developer east of Troost. He's skeptical of their benefit to the very communities they're supposed to help most. While there's lots of talk about building and developing in opportunity zones, Kevin Tubasing is doing it. He's constructing a 67-unit apartment complex. But will you built anyway, even without this incentive? Well, we'll find out. Emily LeCure leads Equity Squared, a nonprofit that is working to find investors and investments in Kansas City's urban neighborhoods. Tammy Buckner is project manager at We Grow KC, a Kauffman Foundation-supported group trying to make sure opportunity zone investments go to the parts of the city that need it most. And checking in with us from California is Kevin Wilson, who has literally written the book about how to invest in opportunity zones. He's a partner with Nova Craddock, one of the nation's top sources for tracking who is investing in this tax tool, why, where, and how much. Emmett Pearson, I'd love to start with you. If opportunity zones are such an extraordinary opportunity, the benefits are so great, are people beating down your door to work with you on a new development at 31st and Prospect or 20th and Troost?
Hello, Nick. To answer your question, thanks for having me. But to answer your question, no. Since opportunity zones have come out, I've only had one conversation, and it's with my good friend Emily, who gave us the time and patience to talk to us about some of the projects that we have. And we have some very large projects, which would be ideal for investment, private investment particularly.
Emily, you've been trying to get investors, trying to get in those investments in that very part of town. What has the response been?
Well, anytime you're trying to do something new, Nick, it takes a little bit of time. And impact investing is new to a lot of people in Kansas City. So the idea that there's something between classic market rate investments and traditional philanthropy, something that generates a deep impact alongside a financial return, takes education, and that takes time.
What has been the biggest barrier, do you think, Tammy, for people to say, hey, this is a great idea in Kansas City, let's invest in those areas we know have struggled for generations?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, for having me. Some of the barriers I feel are just making sure that, what does the residents want? And looking for those opportunities, looking for the communities and making sure that, those funds get into those areas. But the barriers are, do they really want to make a change? Do they really want to allow those communities to build and increase economic mobility and economic wealth?
Kevin Wilson, over in California, you've been tracking how this has been happening around the country. We're at the sort of third birthday of these opportunity zones at this moment in time. Has the response been less than expected, or is it better in other parts of the country?
Nationwide, I would say that it's been better than expected.
I have looked at the map that your company puts out of how all of these investments are taking place around the country. Missouri doing actually pretty well on there. Kansas was a gray area which said not available. Does that mean there's been no investments in Kansas, or that they simply don't report that?
Well, that's an interesting observation. Investor participation in this survey is not only voluntary, but it's also limited to our network of professionals, practitioners, investors, and businesses. So we estimate that the actual dollar amount of OZ investment is probably in the range of 2 to 3 times higher than the $10 billion that we've identified. So, for example, about 30% of that $10 billion is reported from funds that have identified as a nationwide fund. That could include, investment in Kansas that's not included in that map.
We do have somebody with us, though, Kevin Tubasing, our second Kevin, who is actually investing in Kansas, in downtown Shawnee. You're building a 67-unit apartment complex in downtown Shawnee. First of all, I have to ask, would you have been doing that anyway, Kevin, or does opportunity zones and the tax benefits of that, was that really what pushed you over the edge to do this?
The opportunity zone certainly was an inspiration, shall we say, for the investors that came into the project. But the one thing to fundamentally understand about opportunity zones, and let's go back to kind of more development 101 within this opportunity zone 101, is that rent and the ability to pay at market rates drives all development. And that's a very important part to understand about opportunity zones, is that if you cannot actually build and collect rent to pay your mortgage and profit over the 10-year preferred period of time, then you're never going to build a project.
So Nick, I'd like to, if I could. So Community Builds of Kansas City, we are currently looking to break ground on 64 units, market rate housing on the east side of, not Truce, but Prospect, the first project in probably 30 plus years. Where a 1-bedroom is going to be $985. So we're doing market rate here. The difference is that we're doing it on our own without any investment from the city or from any opportunity zone investors at this point. So I get it. I'm just saying that, one is it's location. Folk want to understand where they're going to be. They want to get past the perception that they feel is out there. So, I would be willing to bet you that Kevin and I's project are very similar. Steel is what steel costs, nails are what nails cost. But again, it goes back to opportunity zones coming this way, and we're in an opportunity zone, and we haven't seen folks flocking to our door to make any type of investment.
Many people, though, wouldn't think of downtown Shawnee, Kevin, as an area that was one of the most distressed communities in our entire country, never mind in our entire metro. And you're not building market rate apartments, you're building luxury apartments, right? Is that really within the spirit of what opportunity zones were about?
So Shawnee was an opportunity for us to actually look at a designated census tract that was chosen to be an opportunity zone, understanding that this entire opportunity zone process was not purely statistical. It was also something that was handled by every governor's office, by whether it was a city or other folks that submitted these areas, and then ultimately the governor and the governor's committee chose those areas. And Shawnee in particular was probably one of the better, shall we say, opportunity zones. But it is in the downtown area of Shawnee, which was, of course, built well over 100 years ago. And so you'll find in older areas that have older housing stocks and whatnot, that you'll see more economically depressed areas that are designated there.
Why would I, Emily, want to build, say, where Emmett is developing when I can build in downtown Shawnee or in Martin City? That's also an opportunity zone. Or even in parts of Johnson County like Olathe that are also part of opportunity zones. Wouldn't an investor just decide they get the same tax benefits going there as they would if they were to take a risk and go out on Prospect Avenue?
Sure. Well, opportunities just incentivize private capital, right? They're one arrow in our quiver, and investors can take advantage of them however they like. But there's a reason we're incentivizing capital flows into these zones. And there's this perceived risk and a very long and very painful history of structural barriers. So, a lot of investors are seeing that it's impossible to ignore that we need to reimagine how we allocate capital. And that's turning more and more investors into impact investors because the need is just so profoundly clear right now.
Yeah, are they really big impact investors, though, when they're not basically spending a lot of their capital in areas that are needing it most? They're choosing the lowest hanging fruit areas like downtown Shawnee and other places that are also opportunity zones, Tammy.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's important that they do locate the areas that has, normally does not get these funds. I mean, you look at a downtown Overland Park, and then you look at a 31st and Prospect or a, 31st and, Broadway, and look at those areas. And if you are a true social impacted investor and want to make a difference, then they would definitely choose, an area that's normally not getting that investment.
So Kevin Wilson out in California, is that what's happening around the country, that we've written these opportunity zones in such a wide way, we have more than 8,000 of them, that the truest, most distressed neighborhoods are really not the ones getting the money at this point in time?
By design, businesses that are receiving the benefit of this tax incentive must be in a distressed community, because those were the only ones that were eligible to be selected. Now, within that, there has been a lot of reporting, and there has been some controversy on the selection of those zones, because the governors had the flexibility to select 20% of the state's census tracts that met that definition.
So, Kevin Tubasing, you're a developer, you develop all over. Would you have entertained developing in an opportunity zone, say on Prospect Avenue or east of Troost?
If I can build it and I can rent it at a market rate for that period of time, again, optimally 10 years, then I can justify putting it in that particular zone. So going over to Troost, per your question, is really a matter of, do I, as a developer, or any of the other folks you'll talk to or other developers that are out there, do we have tenants that we know will pay us until we sell the property?
Okay, do you not think so then?
The hard thing you're going to find in building in areas of systemic racial oppression are going to be the fact that you also find lower rents for the most part in those areas versus other areas that have been designated opportunity zones.
So you don't think you could get enough money out of that area to be able to justify that investment?
I'm thrilled that Emmett has found a market rate development. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it. I just don't know. I just have not been able to find the confidence in order to see those market rate rental structures in that area.
So Nick, if I could jump in, both residential, this would be our first residential market rate, but I can tell you we have 300,000 square feet of commercial space that we're getting, on the average $20 a square foot rent plus CAM, so all in about $26. It's pretty decent. And we can talk about the business side of opportunity zones, because if we really go back, opportunity zones was first proposed during the Obama administration. So let's remember that. And it was both real estate as well as business. So we can ask the question, and you haven't yet. So I'm going to jump in your shoes for a hot second and say, okay, so east of Truce, for example, how many businesses have been created or have taken advantage of Opportunity Zone funding to create, start, or expand businesses? I don't know of any.
Okay, well, let's ask Emily that question, because you're actually trying to put together a $5 million fund to do these very things that Emmett is talking about. Have you had any bites?
Yeah, so it's been pretty interesting. Prior to COVID, there was a good deal of momentum building. And in response to COVID, there have actually been some very favorable changes for investors in terms of the 180-day window in order to invest, and some other things that we think make them even more attractive. I think investors are a bit timid at the moment, but overwhelmingly we've actually seen an uptick in interest, and surprisingly it's not from local impact investors. It's from investors outside of the region.
Because part of the Opportunity Zones law allows you to invest anywhere. You could be on the beach in Florida and investing in Kansas City. You can be anywhere you like. And people in Kansas City don't have to invest here. They could be investing out where Kevin Wilson lives in California. But Kevin, you wanted to say something there in the middle?
Opportunity zones were initially only out there for people who had capital gain to invest, which to a large extent, when you're actually focusing on allowing a business to start up in an economically depressed area of our city, how many people in that area that want to start a business or expand their business have capital gain versus cash that they may have made from profit from operating their business? So the very nature of the structure of Opportunity Zones was flawed from the beginning, because it did not allow cash to come in from an existing business operator. They had to have capital gain, such as in the stock market, in order to invest.
The New York Times reports that wealthy Americans are using the tax break to invest in hotels, office towers, luxury apartments, and other projects benefiting the rich. Is there any evidence that's exactly what's happening in Kansas City, Tammy?
We do see some that are attempting to come in, but that's what the coalition is put in place for, so that we don't get these investors that, like you said, sitting on the beach trying to invest in areas that they know nothing about. They know nothing about the residents. So we're not getting that, just yet, but we have seen some interest in that. So those are the type of, things that we're looking for, and making sure that they do their due diligence in making sure what the community wants. But But
there's nothing in the law, though, that would prevent them from doing that, is there?
There's nothing, no, absolutely not.
So the federal statute doesn't prohibit such investment, but I think it's very important, that local governments and stakeholders have a say in whether or not such proposed assets are permitted in the community. So, it's encouraging to hear, what Tammy says with regards to, what you guys are doing in Kansas City there.
Some critics have complained Opportunity Zones are simply a new way to move minorities out by gentrification. Is there any evidence that is happening in Kansas City, Emmett?
To my knowledge, I have not seen that, to be honest with you. I really haven't. So no, that has not been my experience.
Other critics take issue with the economic underpinnings of the plan. The program won't work as advertised because it's based on the faulty notion that urban or rural deterioration results from excessive taxation undermining capital investment. That's the words of Timothy Weaver, an urban policy professor at Albany State University. But aren't Opportunity Zones a response to the fact that nothing else has jump-started investment in these most distressed areas?
I believe it is as we're looking at it, it's a vehicle. It's just a vehicle, just like there's been multiple other zones or multiple other projects that attempted to do the same thing in the past. So we're not using it as, the end all to be all, because there's so many other incentives. We're not sure where it's going to be in 10 years. Some people are not even sure how to, complete an exit strategy. So I think the overall goal is to utilize that as an incentive and allow it to help jumpstart these changes in the urban core.
You said it's complicated, and is that one of the reasons, Tammy, why so many people are not taking advantage of these? The rules have been changing, and people like Emmett are just investing even without them and developing without them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very complicated. They don't know the end result. And it's easier, to find funding elsewhere. I mean, as Emmett, they're doing it on their own, which, with a project such as his, people should be knocking down his door, to invest in those areas of Kansas City. But yeah, it's difficult and things have changed. We were getting rules as they were building up. So, out throughout the whole year, there's more changes, there's more rules. So yeah, I think it was very difficult.
And there's been pleas in Congress to actually abolish the opportunity zones. That has been building. Investors like certainty, Kevin Wilson, with another general election on the way. Could the result of that general election impact whether we even continue with opportunity zones?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very unlikely that they would do away with opportunity zones. Keep in mind the concept of opportunity zones was originally introduced as a broadly supported bipartisan bill. I think that we would be more likely to see expanded reporting requirements that are intended to, enhance transparency. We may also see Congress explore ways to expand the incentive to boost economic recovery efforts because, OZ investments are situated to help some of the hardest hit communities during the pandemic, during the post-pandemic recovery. I also think that, we might see a number of state and local governments compete for this opportunity zone capital by providing expanded incentives and benefits for the types of projects that they would like to see in these communities.
As the program winds down, potentially then a decade from now, what in your judgment would you like to see that opportunities zones manage to achieve, Kevin Toubasi?
It's a broad question, so I'll give you a big picture, I guess. I think an opportunity zones concept is good. I think one of the fundamental problems we have in our nation, as we've been experiencing the last few years, is suppressed generational wealth in economically depressed areas. And something that allows the community to invest at a tax benefit versus only allowing capital gain to flow into their own community, I think is a great original start to that new idea. But there has to be less rules, less handcuffs that allow you to come into these communities and operate, not just succeed after 10 years.
Emily, what would you like that picture to look like 10 years from now, after 10 years of the opportunity zones and they're winding down?
Yeah, well, opportunity zones have opened up a whole host of conversations about impact investing that otherwise may not have happened. And if we can leverage them to drive more hometown capital into quality job creating businesses and minority founders and innovative wealth generating products, then our city will look profoundly different in 10 years.
But you have been trying to put a $5 million fund together to be investing in that community impact way, the socially significant way. How far are you at in that, getting to that total right now?
We have more capital that is not opportunity zone capital than we do op zone capital, to put that into perspective. So, opportunity zones are starting a lot of good conversations with folks about how to use their capital. Whether or not they're going to materialize, I don't care if we're using op zone funds. What I care about is the impact and that we're investing in meaningful projects and businesses.
When the
and that's happening.
When the opportunity zones are winding down 10 years from now, what would you like the impact to have been, Emmett?
Hopefully the impact would be that we would have seen private investment come in to create catalytic projects, changing the landscape for both wealth creation, business opportunities for those chronically underserved communities that exist throughout America, and particularly in Kansas City, to further remove the barrier that exists between the have and have-nots of not now truth, but moving toward Prospect and other areas in the city.
But you have been skeptical, and you remain so, right?
I am, but hey, I'm an old dog in this game. 30 years of seeing, whether it's opportunity zones, empowerment zones, enhanced enterprise communities, urban development action areas. I've seen all of whatever the new, alphabet soup of the day is for the legislators that are in Washington, D.C. This one is a little bit different because it allows capital gains. But let's be clear, very few folk other than Community Builders of Kansas City, Westside Housing, and other strong nonprofits are not going to are the only ones, for the most part, changing the landscape of Kansas City's east side. And it's been by their sweat and equity, putting their resources on the table, and banks coming to the table at the very last moment.
Kevin Wilson, would we have changed the landscape of America 10 years from now when opportunity zones are winding down?
We'll see. I think we'll take a look back on some of the statistics that gave rise to this concept and see if correlations can be drawn between the tax incentive and measurable impact and improvement in these distressed communities in key metrics like job creation, new businesses, and economic growth in these communities.
We have protests all around the country right now, and parts of that are also about giving people a fair shake who for generations have not. But is it possible, though, Kevin, that the whole economic disparity, the income inequality gap in this country would actually increase as a result of opportunity zones if the wealthiest of Americans are the ones benefiting the most?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think that we'll have to be able to look back and see if these investments bring equitable economic growth. I mean, I think that's what many are looking for here.
Final word goes to you, Tammy. 10 years from now, what would you like the opportunity zones to have done to try and transform Kansas City?
First of all, this is the first time that something has seriously tried to incentivize equity. I feel that this is not just about real estate. It's definitely about business, and most importantly about communities. In 10 years from now, I would hope to see mixed houses. I would hope to see businesses growing. I would hope to see workforce development in areas that has just truly been, not getting these opportunities in the past. So that's hopefully definitely what I'm liking to see in Kansas City.
But after spending what could be up to $6 trillion in investment on this, and if that doesn't happen, how would that make you feel?
Probably pretty disgusted, because with that size of a money and that size of an income, yeah, it would be very troubling.
Tammy, so much. Thank you very much. Emmett, Emily. And we also know that two Kevins are always better than one, Kevin Wilson and Kevin Tubeson. Thank you. By the way, check out more reporting and see video profiles of all of the opportunity zones where you live at KCPT's digital magazine, Flatland KC. You can find them at flatlandkc.org/opportunity zones. Thanks to all of you on our Zoom board for checking in with us. I'm Nick Haynes. Good night.